What is up, everybody? Welcome to Fairway to Heaven. This is the AT&T Pro-Am at Pebble Beach week. We're going to break down the fantasy and gambling side of things. I've got my special guest, Sam Wagman, join me today. Fairway to Heaven starts in just 1 minute. And what is up, everybody? Welcome to Fairway to Heaven, right here on the DSM Media Network. We're live, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. You know the drill. Like, share, retweet, follow on all social media platforms. But do me that favor, especially if you want to get interactive with the show today, head over to the DSM Media YouTube page, hit the like and the subscribe button, turn the notifications on because you never want to miss a second when we are live. It's also, like I said, best place to get interactive. If you got questions on this week's Pebble Beach Pro-Am, that's the place to drop your questions. I'm your host, as always, Phil Stiefel, at Beard of Knowledge on Twitter. And I got my man, Sam Wagman, at Swagman95, joining me today. Good evening, Sam. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, and we were chatting a little bit before the show how I just came back from a bachelor party, so I have been working my body to pretty much the bone trying to get back into the swing of everything here. But I am ready to talk about the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am because I just played a course quite like it this weekend, so I'm excited to break into it.
I love that, and you'll start to learn as you get older, Sam, that the body does not recover quite as quickly as it did back in the college days. You know, every year that ticks by, I'm glad I've got nobody else to go to a bachelor party for, because I don't think my body could physically handle another bachelor party at this point.
Yeah, I don't think I consumed this much alcohol since college. There were some very crazy hours on this trip where I thought my body was just going to shut down. So I'm glad it didn't, and I'm glad we get to come back here. But it is a great time because it is the middle of golf season, and thankfully this is the last week that we're going to see this rotating course schedule. We still have 3 courses this week, but look, it's always a treat to be able to watch the guys play at Pebble Beach. It's a shame we only get two rounds a year there now. So
that was actually going to be one of my first things I said. It's like it is. I hate the course rotation. It does make it difficult for handicapping these tournaments. But why have a course rotation when Pebble Beach is involved? I mean, Pebble Beach is one of the most iconic, legendary courses. One of my favorite courses. So many great memories from this course. And you're going to throw not taking anything away from Monterey Peninsula or Spyglass. I mean, they just don't hold a candle to Pebble Beach. And you go from Torrey Pines to Pebble Beach, and you got 4 rounds between the 2 great legendary courses. I mean, that to me is probably the biggest hiccup of the early part of this golf season.
Yeah, absolutely, and we get a lot of we get greatness from these courses though. So it is great to see. It's just a shame there's not a ton of talent in this field outside of the big 3 that we have here with what's their names? Fitzpatrick, Jordan Spieth, and
Hovland.
Yeah, and Hovland. So
I mean, you only got 10 of the top 50 golfers in the world in this field. That right there just says how weak the field. And when you think about it, it is Pebble Beach, and you've only got 10 top 50 guys showing up here. You know, it's kind of almost an insult to Pebble Beach, as a course as a whole.
Yeah, but we do break it down. I think there's some pieces. I think there's some guys to be able to bet in this field, and really
Absolutely.
surprise, it's not any of the top three. So you
Yeah,
know,
actually, I agree with you. Real quick, I do got to ask you, before you got to the Dominican, did you join in the mass parade of people that outright bet Max Homa? Because
yes, I
I
did.
did. Does it mean anything to you that, like, I mean, I was bragging I hit Max Homa first off, so just a little background. It's about just over 2 years since I've been picking golfers and doing fantasy golf. Okay, so 2 full seasons in the start of this year. I've hit 11 outrights in basically just over 2 years. Three of them have been Max Homa wins. So, there's something about there's three of them have been Farmers Insurance. I've hit three straight Farmers Insurance outrights and three times Max Homa. You know, something about Max Homa. I mean, I think he's one of the most underrated golfers on tour. I mean, this guy plays at a top 5, top 10 level most weeks, yet he's often overlooked.
Yeah, and he really hasn't been able to put it together in the majors yet. He doesn't have a great record there. I think we see that change. I hope we see that change a little bit.
At the US
It's
Open.
it's notable that it took him some years to mature because he's been on the tour for a while now. But he's 32 already, so he's getting up there in his golf prime age,
Mhm.
if we call it that, and he's really only just starting to string together consistent results now. So that worries me a little bit as to if we can see this kind of consistency from him continue. I'm hoping we can see him contend at some of the majors this year because his game is really fun to watch. It works out really well for the majors. I think that's probably why you see so many people bet him on a week to week basis, because his game fits most of these courses that are in the rotation so well these days. He's just got such a sweet swing. He's so good with the irons. He's great with the putter when he needs to be. So I think it's
I jumped as soon as he won. I went right to the sports book and I looked at all his majors odds, and I can't remember if I 35 to 1 or 45 to 1. I don't even know what course the U.S. Open's at this year. Didn't do any research. I'm like, you know what? Max Homa looks like a U.S. Open champion, and he plays those tough courses, tough fields, thick rough where you got to be accurate and a good approach player. All those things. He does those things so well in tough fields. I'm like, you know what? We're locking in Max Homa as my first U.S. Open futures bet for this season.
I like that. I like that. And that's 40 to 1. You got that at?
It was either 35 or 45 to 1. He was
Nice.
50 to 1 at the Masters. He was 50 to 1 at the PGA, and then he was just below that for the U.S. Open. So I'm like, you know what? I like him at a U.S. Open course. Let's see if I can hit 4 Max Homa outrights in my 2 year
Yeah.
stint.
Yeah, because he's never gonna wow you at one of those courses where you gotta score really low. He's never gonna go like that because he doesn't racetrack these courses that much. He's just a very nice, consistent, solid player. And if he's able to do it for 4 straight days, he strings together enough to win. And that's what he did on Saturday when he came from behind. And it definitely was really nice to get that notification on Saturday night that he was able to string it together. Though I was rooting for Keegan Bradley. I got to admit it. I had a 65 to 1
Oh.
Keegan number that I really wanted to hit, but that was a crapshoot. I felt bad for Sam Ryder.
Yeah, Sam Ryder, that was a shame. I mean, they spent a lot of time talking about how he's improved and he's a mature golfer and interviews with his mom the whole final round, and then he just completely fell apart. And
Yeah, talk
you know,
about someone who can really race out to a lead. Sam Ryder fits that bill. He can go on those streaks. It's just he's not able to. The consistency is not quite there yet. So for him,
okay,
when
actually,
that
that's
matures,
that's a great segue to this
hmm
week's AT&T Pebble Beach racing out, because last year at this event, same as Power, jumped out to a huge first 2 round lead, and
hmm
I had him as an outright last year.
hmm
It was one of the first bets I made this year. Was there this week? I can't got to find my odds in my notes here. Yeah, I only got him at 19 to 1, but he jumps out to that big lead. He fits this type of course. You know, First and foremost, when you're playing a weak field like this, odds and DraftKings prices, there's a lot of sticker shock when you're looking at both boards, and you kind of got to forget about the sticker shock when you're trying to pick these players. 19 to 1 for Power. That's crazy number for somebody of his level. But
now he is 25 to 1 at points bet.
Okay, yeah.
And
See,
that's the number I got it. That's the number I got him
yeah.
at there. So
I only use one sports book, which I know is a big major rate. Big. I should have multiple sports books. I just like to keep it simple with one. But he jumps out to that big lead last year at this event. The third round, he just completely had a major meltdown. He kind of played okay in round 4, but never was really in contention. After he fell apart after round 2. I'm taking that and I'm looking at how well he played here in the first couple rounds and thinking that translates to this week being a very good play, DraftKings wise and gambling wise, both ends of it. As a really strong play this week. What are your thoughts on him?
oh
Trying
yeah,
to get back into contention again. I know you bet him outright, but was the only reason because of how he collapsed last year, or is it because he's a much better golfer than he was last year at this point?
well, I agree with both of those things. Honestly, he collapsed at Monterey last year, but
Mhm.
he's played very well at Spyglass Hill, which is probably the most difficult, depending on how the weather blasts these courses. Spyglass kind of presents the most difficult of the course because of the 5 or 6 holes that are exposed to the coast out there. But
Mhm.
I mean, he played really well at Spyglass. He ranks in the top 10 in strokes gained total there. He's a extremely strong iron player who can get it done on pretty much all surfaces, and then played really well on the pebble side as well. For me, power is definitely going to be a consistent look. His struggle is definitely going to be the approach. It
Mhm.
typically is with his game, but he plays really well around the greens here.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things I view as the most important thing about Pebble Beach is that these small greens that rank as one of the smallest on tour at 3,500 square feet, you're going to be able to, one, hit the green regulation. And two, if you can't hit the green regulation, you need to be able to scramble from around the green. And that is where power has consistently stood out. He ranked 7th in my model on strokes gained around the green. So that was really important for me to see something like that as well. And then he also ranks in the top 25 in greens and regulation gained as
Mhm.
well. So two things that I view as two of my most important metrics this week. And then he picks it up. He's average in good drives gained, which on these, Pebble Beach is obviously a second shot course.
Mhm.
So, you're going to have guys cutting their drivers down to
You,
the 3/4 270 range.
you know what's really crazy? I mean, he's so I've got my Fantasy National, which we're partnered with here, Fairway to Heaven, my model up on a side screen here, and he finished 60th in my model. So, I say it every single week. You take the model with a grain of salt. You try to look at the details. I mean, he's out of this field. He's 112th ranked in the last 36 rounds in approach. But that bucket range, that 100 to 125, because these courses are so small, he ranks 10th in the last 36 rounds. So
Yep.
I kind of look at the fact that, like you said, the great around the green play, he fits into that bucket. So many golfers, they club down, they do what they have to do to hit certain little buckets, in the fairway. I think Power is primed to have another great week this week.
Yeah, and the important thing is that he's also going to be underrated because I think a lot of people are going to, if they do boot up their models at Fantasy National, and he came in at 39th in my model, because I think I put in my rounds for last 24 rounds,
Okay.
which I tend to like to do,
Mhm.
uh, places like this, especially because you don't have. You don't have the full 4 rounds to choose from on ShotLink. You only have the 2 from Pebble Beach. So I went with a little bit of a smaller sample size, but I do think Power runs a little bit under the radar. He's going to be he's obviously one of the more expensive guys. He's at 9,800 on DraftKings. He's 2,500, 25 to 1. He's 19 to 1 on DraftKings. So it presents a little bit of an issue to take him when he's the 6th most expensive golfer in the field.
Mhm.
But I think of this range, Tom Hoagie is there. If you want to take him to repeat, that's fine. I'm not. Putnam is there. Keith Mitchell is there. Justin Rose is there. I don't want to take any of those guys. I think Seamus Power is the one that shows me the biggest ceiling when I'm
Mhm.
looking at what we can get there. And I think he really wants to get it done. And I do think that he's extremely motivated to build on the strong showing that he started with last year and then just fell apart at
Yeah,
the easiest course in the rotation.
I agree with that. Everything you said there. He's tied for second most clicked golfer in my DraftKings lineup. Everybody talks about ownership percentage. Right now, Fantasy Nationals only got him at 13%, just over 13%. I mean, that's really, really great for a guy that contended here last year. I want to jump to the top four price guys, the top guys odds wise. First and foremost, before we talk about any specific golfer, when you're building your lineups, when you're building your bets, do you try to theory wise? Because I do this a lot. Do you look at golfers' odds and then where they're ranked price wise in DraftKings and try to find like some kind of like Tom Hoagie? He's the fourth most expensive golfer. DraftKings right now has him as the sixth or seventh odds. So they don't think he's going to win as much, but the pricing put him up there pretty high. So I kind of always try to look at those things and correlate whether that's going to tell me this is a good golfer to play or not, or this is a good golfer to bet or not based off of the difference in pricing.
I think Hoagie's price is definitely correlated to the fact that he's probably he's probably the best approach golfer in this field.
Mhm.
And I think on a course like Pebble Beach, what? Oh, I think they do realize that that's going to be such an important stat here this week that they're going to go directly for him there. And I do think Hoagie becomes a higher price own. I think when you're looking at DFS, they're going to take that into account. They know he won last year. They know people are going to pick him because he won and because he's demonstrated a sustained level of success at a course like this. So I do think that correlates it. For me, I don't typically look at DraftKings price that much. I look more at the owner. I look more at the betting number, and then I want to see what they've done recently. I want to see how their stats line up for the course. And then but mostly I weigh their recent performance a lot more than I weigh their stats to the course, because that tells me whether they're in the frame of mind to be able to go into this course and win at this stage.
So with the top guys, you got Jordan Spieth, Victor Hovland, Matthew Fitzpatrick. I mean, Tom Hoagie, that's a sticker shock kind of price, like we talked about before, sticker shock. But Spieth, Hovland, Fitzpatrick, they're all elite golfers, obviously. Jordan Spieth obviously has the amazing course history. Obviously, last year, the famous shot of him on the cliff there, and I would have just taken a drop ball. There's no way I'm hitting that shot last year that he took. Do you tend to get sticker shy when somebody's 11-1, 9-1, 10-1 in that range betting wise?
I
Unless their name's John Rahm, outside of that, do you get do you try to find better value on your betting card when you're placing these bets?
Yeah, and I even have had sticker shock with John Rahm this year. I didn't want to touch
Yeah,
him at any of the first three events of the year that he played,
I
and
hit
two
I
of
hit up
them that he
Cincinnati
won.
for one a few weeks ago. So
Yeah, I mean,
I just took three of my outright. Like I bet three less people, and I just tripled my bet on John Rahm that week.
yeah, and I think if for someone like Rom, who was plus 450 at the Amex,
Right.
but 650 and I believe 700 at the two that he won,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to pretty much go single bullets there. You have to be okay with, I'm throwing in all my eggs on this guy, and if he busts, then I'm screwed for this week. So I think you kind of have to be okay with that mindset. I like having a little more opportunities and options for my cards. So I do find myself shying away from those much lower priced guys, because the tournament of champions is one thing. It's a 39 hole or a 39 person field,
Mm-hmm.
but in every other field this year, I wouldn't have touched Rom because there are 130 to 150 people in these fields. Golf is a sport that if any guy plays that much better for 4 days straight, he's going to win. It doesn't matter whether John Rahm's the best player in the world. He could have one bad hour and it could screw everything up. And I didn't want to wager at, plus 450 on that, because any single little thing can go wrong. And we saw that with John Rahm. His first hour on Saturday was horrible.
Yeah.
And he didn't play
I was
well
I was
on
kicking
Saturday.
myself in the butt on after round two because he had fallen to 20-1, and I'm like, is this great value here? And then he has a great Friday round three. I'm like, oh man, I really should have bet that 20-1. And then
It's
I'm like,
funny. It's funny
really
because
tough to come
what
back.
Ryder was what 12 under after round 2, and
Right.
Rom I think was 3 under, and he was still only 20-1. I mean, that's just it feels egregious to me that you're starting with that much of a deficit and you're paying that bad of a price just because the guy's name is John Rahm and he's won 2 of his last tournaments. I call that extreme sticker shock. And it just led me away from these guys because each of Spieth, Fitzpatrick, and Hovland has a deficit that can be exploited by a course like this. And Hovland's is obviously obvious, and the other two are a little bit more, a little bit more hidden and harder to find, but they're there. And I don't, so it leads me to not wanting to bet them at short
Right.
favorites, and all of them. Spieth and Fitzpatrick are currently 11-1, and Hovland is 12-1, and all of those you can find at DraftKings. But
I will say Matthew Fitzpatrick, I have not bet him because I'm not going to take that risk at 11-1 or that lack of value at 11-1. But he is my number one click. I've done my basic 20 lineups already, and he's in 10 of 20. This week, I'm a little straight. Normally, my top guys 12, 13, 14 clicks. I've come down a little bit this week. Matthew Fitzpatrick is the type of golfer. He was 6th here last year. That should be able to have consistent, repetitive success at
yeah,
this kind of an event.
but even he has his struggles. He grades out at 118th in my model on strokes gained approach, and his proximity numbers from 100 to 125 are not good. So again, each of these golfers has their issues.
Yeah.
It's how much you pay attention to your models or not.
Mhm.
This presents. He's one of the better drivers on tour. He's one of the better drivers in this field. So I might take him just because of that reason. But I would be more comfortable clicking a top 10 for Matt Fitzpatrick, where you can
Okay.
get it at plus 140 on Bet365, than I would for him to click an outright at 11-1. That just seems like much better value at that point for me.
You mentioned the top 10, and I've been trying really hard to not just bet outrights and focus
Mhm.
on my lineups. I'm trying to drop in some top 10, top 20, top 40 bets. The problem is I'm having a lot of trouble finding the right strategy here because let's see. So I've hit 2 out of 4 outrights this calendar year.
Mhm.
And every single week, at least 3 or 4 of my outrights are in the top 5. But yet I'm not betting my outrights in the top 20. Should I so last week I had 5 top 20 guys or 5 top 20 bets. Not one of them hit last week. But none of those were my out I didn't match my outrights with my top 20s. I'm thinking maybe that strategy is wrong. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong when I'm clicking on top 20 bets because my DraftKings lineups are cashing regularly. My showdown lineups are cashing regularly. I'm hitting outrights or almost hitting every single week multiple outrights. But yet I can't figure out the right strategy to pick on these odds for top 20. What do you
Well,
do when you're looking at top 10 or top 20 odds? What are you looking at to figure out that that's worth the value there? Because obviously
so
plus 125, for top 10, you've got to bet, a fair amount of money to turn a profit there. And that's what I'm struggling to figure out there.
So what and I'm nowhere near the level that some of the people I know that are very good at betting golf is. So this is just my philosophy when I
Yeah,
do
I
this.
love to learn new
And
philosophies and
mhm.
strategies here.
So what I've found is that you're looking on two different strategies, two different sides of the same coin when you're betting an outright versus when you're betting a placement. An outright, you're looking for a ceiling play, but a placement, you might be looking at more of a floor play. So let's take a top 20 versus an outright. A
Okay.
top 20 guy might have an off day where he shoots one over or even when the rest of the field is averaging 2 under or 3 under. A ceiling guy has to shoot 66 every single day or else he's not going to win.
Okay.
So you're looking for guys who can show at least consistency. Maybe they're not going to ball out every single day. Maybe they're not going to score all those birdies, but they're going to be consistency. They're going to be the ones who aren't three putting that much. They're going to be the ones who are finishing their strokes. They're going to be the ones who are gaining the most greens in regulation. They're going to be the ones who are accurate on the fairways. And those guys at the top, those guys might be the ones that are bombing their drives and gouging it out from wherever they come from. They're going to be the ones who are holding miraculous eagle putts. They're going to be the ones who are pulling Davis Thompsons where they have 2-3 eagles in a round. Those are the kind of ceiling outcomes you're looking for, and you're looking for, out of 100 times, how many times is this guy going to pull that ceiling outcome out of his game? Well, in the placements, you're looking at how many times out of 100 is this guy going to be consistent enough to get me where I need to go. So I think you're looking at a
I think that's a
different
really sound strategy because, like, the two names that I kind of like, I bet one of these names outright because I think there's a really high, ceiling there, and the numbers, great. And I put him in, a decent amount of lineups, but less than 50% of my lineups. But his floor is probably a lot lower, than others. Like Lanto Griffin, it's a name. He's 7,600 on DraftKings. I bet him 90-1 to win. He's got a lot better of a game than people realize at this point. And his DraftKings pricing, the last I checked, let me pull it up here real quick. I mean, his ownership.
He was 90-1 earlier, wasn't he?
Yeah, I got him at 90-1. I think he's still at 90-1. But maybe him at plus 320, top 20, because based off of the strategy.
Ooh, 101. Let's go.
Oh, he's up to 101.
On points bet.
Plus 320, top 20. His ceiling to floor, there's such a wide range. Maybe I'm not looking at the ceiling versus the floor thing enough when I'm looking at these top 20s.
So I will say, and this pertains, specifically something you can play around with. I like to play around with my fantasy national lineups when I'm doing this. I like to how we can.
You muted yourself there, bud.
I look at where I can add more weight and take off more weight from one or another category. So I'll play around with my fantasy national lineups, and for a ceiling guy, I'm going to be looking at someone who's going to be better on the greens and who's going to be better dialing their approach wedges in. And if I'm looking at a placement, I might look at someone who's going to be gaining more fairways and gaining more greens and regulations, and the guys who can get up and down with their strokes around the green. So I'm going to be looking at places where I can mix and match my weighted, what I care about much more, and give into that. So I'm not sure if that works for everyone. It's worked pretty well for me. I didn't hit outrights that consistently last year, but I hit top 10s and 20s pretty consistently when I found that we were doing our show over at Fantasy Points. And I think there's a really good example this week with a guy like Denny McCarthy, who is plus 188 for a top 20, and he's 4,500 on PointsBet to win outright. Now, McCarthy is a guy who has always been a very sound putter, but he doesn't do a lot of other stuff that well. And, my model, which is currently set up for, outright more than consistency, has McCarthy at 48th because he's never going to be that great at finding the fairways. But he is going to be great at hitting greens in regulation. He's pretty good at strokes game putting. Obviously, this year he's taking a little bit of a step back, but he's still up there. So, I'm looking for guys who can be consistent in that range. And I view putting and around the green as the most consistency favorable stats when building my models on a weekly basis. So I do think
Denny McCarthy, first off, so DraftKings got his top 20 at plus 210. That was one of my question marks maybes that I was going to bet this week. I didn't bet him outright, but I had a question mark to maybe outright. But I think the McCarthy versus the Lanto Griffin, I think that's a great, how you describe your outrights versus your top 20s is a great example why Lanto is a great, outright bet, but maybe not a good top 20 bet, where McCarthy is the complete opposite. I'm looking at McCarthy now, and you're saying what's important to you. Last 4 rounds, hasn't lost strokes putting at all. He's only lost strokes putting twice in the last 3 times in the last he's only lost strokes putting 3 times since the Sony Open of 2022. So
right. And also someone
had something like that.
Also what McCarthy has done, he hasn't been great. He's been okay at these courses. He's been pretty good at Monterey and Spyglass, but he struggled a little bit at Pebble, which gives me pause as to whether he can contend for the title. But I know he'll play well at Spyglass and Monterey, which should give him a chance to sneak in the back door and get me a top 20. And I'm getting it at almost 2-1 odds. There's enough value there for me to take a swing there. And I saw the same thing for a guy like Ben Griffin, who rates out very highly in my model. But at the same time, this is a guy who's never won before, despite the fact he has 7 top 30 finishes this year in his rookie season. I can't argue with those results. So why would I go for the swing? You can take a swing on Ben Griffin, and he is 66-1, but that's a little high. That's a range that guys like Davis Riley and Kurt Kitayama and Taylor Pendrith and Scott Stallings are residing. These are all guys that are known and have their name known. Ben Griffin is a rookie. He doesn't have his name known yet, but Ben Griffin is also plus 260 for a top 20. And with him rating out so heavily in my model and his game looking to be so friendly at a course rotation like this, man, I'm going to swing on that as a top 20 placement all day long because it seems a safer bet, but one that I'm still going to gain some ROI on.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've already bet him outright. He was one of my first outrights because of everything you said there. I mean, rookies eventually got to win. Oh, they don't actually have to, but really good rookies eventually are going to win. One name that hasn't won really yet, and I thought he was going to break out last year. I thought he was going to break out earlier this year is one you mentioned already, Davis Riley. He hasn't broken out. And he's a guy last year in a field like this, my whole card, draft betting wise and fantasy wise, would be littered with his name. I don't see him written down anywhere on my maybes, my potentials. Yep. I wouldn't even know he's in the field if I wasn't paying attention to the field. You know what I mean? That's how much he has let me down. And why do people keep going back to him?
I couldn't tell you. All I know is that I had an unhealthy obsession with Davis Riley as an outright for so long last season. And towards the end of the year, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. This guy's burning $10-20 in my pocket every single time I bet him because he can't finish. Yeah. If he had a couple. Where was he playing?
Mexico, 9th at Byron Nelson, 4th at Charles Schwab, 2nd at Valspar. He had a little stretch there in March and April where he went on a run.
And he also had I can't remember the country. I can't remember the country club where he was playing. He carried a lead into Sunday and then just fell straight apart down the stretch. And it absolutely broke my heart because that was another week that I had him as an outright, and it just wasn't meant to be. He shows so much promise, and he's such a good player. Last year was one of his first full years coming over from the Corn Ferry, and it just it wasn't meant to be because he was really hit or miss. So a guy like that is not someone I'm confident betting as a placement most weeks. That's a guy I'm going to swing on. And because he doesn't have any consistency, if he's not in the top 10, he probably missed the cut because he did something stupid. He went on a 4-hole bender where he shot 3 over. So he's going to screw up his round that way, which makes me sad because his game is so good. His approach game is one of the best I've seen on tour. He's just not great off the tee. He's not quite there yet, but his putting is good. If his putting gets better, he could be a really, really special golfer, but we'll have to see if he takes another first step. But he's another swing.
Down. He actually has fallen in the DraftKings ownership percentage projections on Fantasy National. He is now sub 7%. He's 7,800 on DraftKings for a guy that used to get a lot of hype and has had for a while. I think some of the DraftKings people are starting to finally realize it, the fantasy people, because there was no way in a field like this last year, Davis Riley's under 14 or 15% owned.
Oh, 100%. And he rates
on the sub 7 now. So,
and he rates out pretty highly in the models too. I mean, he's 20th in my model. Alonzo Griffin is 13th in my model. So, I mean, all these guys are up there because they have all these great pieces to their game. There's just one part of their game that they lack in. For Riley this year, it's been the putting and his around the green, which is probably going to knock him out of being a placement for me because what did I just say the last 10 minutes? Around the green and putting are two of the most important consistency things to me when I'm weighting it. So, his ability to, gain greens in regulation and his ability to gain good drives off the tee, they'll be strengths for him. But I don't know if they're going to take him all the way. So that's again something that's going to be an issue for him. But I would feel comfortable betting him as an outright just because his number is very low as well.
All right, here's another name that I got an out. I don't have an outright or a top 20 on, but a lot of question marks. A guy that I thought was going to, really break out at the end of 2 years ago. At the end of 2021, he was hot. He played really well in the playoffs at the end of 2021, and then last year he just had a terrible summer last year. I don't even know if he got hurt because he's got very few. He has no events between July and October on his card. But he finished sixth last week at the American Express. His odds and his numbers are really good, and that's Eric Van Rooyen. He was sixth at the American Express a couple weeks ago, where he gained strokes, a massive amount of strokes across the board. He's a guy that modeled out really well for me too. And I think, again, this is where the model sometimes comes into play. When you're last 36, last 24, it's the last 36 or 24 that they played, and he didn't play a lot. So these numbers are going back a long time. But he's a great approach player. He's a great, in that proximity bucket that we're looking at, a great tee to green player overall. Terrible around the green over his last 36. But everything else, seems to be there for Eric Van Rooyen. I didn't load up on him on a massive amount of lineups, but plus 320 is his top 20. I forget where his outright was. I did not bet him yet. I had it written down somewhere and I can't find it. But, any thoughts on Eric Van Rooyen? Am I completely nuts on him?
No, I think he fits the mold of guys who have had success here. Guys like Hoagie who have rode very strong approach games to wins here. Van Rooyen kind of fits that mold.
He had a great mustache. 2 years ago, he had a great mustache. I don't know if he still has it, but
I hope he still has it. It was
the mustache on point there.
Yeah,
in 2021.
My question is, can he get the putter going? Because that's his weak point, and unfortunately, on these slow POA greens, you gotta get that putter going, and his is just not that strong.
So the question,
I wonder.
I want to ask you a putting question, because this week, when there's the course rotation, it's a little different because we're only playing Pebble Beach twice this week in the event, but Pebble's got some of the smallest greens on tour. I think it was the top 5 and smallest greens. I think 3,500 average. I kind of grade putting even less than normal when they're small greens, because I grade around the green or your short game and your approach and your short bucket's a little bit higher, because if you get on the green, most of the time you're going to have a short enough putt where it's going to be a 2-putt or less opportunity for guys.
Yeah, that's fair. For me, I like to always have putting in there as a pretty healthy grade, just because it ends up being important at a course like this where you're not seeing huge winning scores, given that the last winners, I'm looking for them right now. Let's see. 19, 18, 19, 19, 17, 19, 17, 22. So, putting still becomes important to a degree here because of the higher scoring average. So, on a course where you're having so many higher scores, it's still going to be important to be able to rank highly and gain some strokes putting there as well. I think it's definitely going to matter at more of the Spyglass and Monterey courses where we don't gain a lot of data courses more than Pebble Beach, given that Pebble Beach has those smaller greens. But I still think it's important because players can fall apart on that putting there, and this course is just enough of a birdie fest enough for me to still weight it pretty highly.
Okay. Let's continue down. There's a lot of names. Do any of these names? Thomas Dietrich is a name that I've been all over all year. You would think in a weaker field I'd jump all over him, but I'm still hesitant on him. Alex Smalley, another name I've been all over.
Love Smalley. I clicked his outright.
But what was his outright when you got it?
His outright for me was
DraftKings has him at 40-1 right now.
I clicked him at 50 to 1 on BetMGM.
Okay.
He
Dietrich at 45 to 1. These guys were guys I was following, and they were trending in the right direction. But then all of a sudden, a small field or a weak field like this, all of a sudden, I'm losing confidence in them for some reason.
Well, I mean, I got to tell you, someone like Alex Smalley is a perfect player for this course. He's already short off the tee, so it doesn't matter. He's one of the best wedge players on tour.
Absolutely.
He ranks first in greens and regulation gains for me. He's a good enough player around the green to where it's going to be okay. But like his approach numbers, his greens and regulation numbers, his proximity bucket, and his good drives gained. He's a very accurate driver, gets in the fairway. And he's got a great number on DraftKings at 8,700. I mean, he ranked out 7th in my model, and he's right there for me. He was the first name I clicked this morning when I took him. So I love Smalley.
Okay, I mean, he's 10th in my model as well. For all the same reasons. I mean, we build our models differently, but if you think about it, what's funny is we've built our models differently. You do 24 rounds, I do 36 rounds, but we've got a lot of the same names in the basic same area there. Any other names, as we go down this board? I've seen a lot of guys I respect talking about Lipsky and Nick Taylor, Robbie Shelton. We've already talked about Lanto Griffin. In that bottom 8K, upper 7K range, or in that 40
I got one for you
range that you like?
I got one for you, and I think he's a little bit more expensive. He's 9,400 on DraftKings.
Okay.
What do you think about Matt Kuchar?
I am never right on Matt Kuchar in anything. Something about Matt Kuchar and Stuart Sink, they fall into the same category. I love to watch them play golf because they're the old guys. They're the vets. They've been around a long time. They shouldn't contend with the young athletes of PGA Tour, but they've both had great careers and they still contend. Whenever I decide to play these guys on DraftKings or bet them, they miss I almost skip over someone like Matt Kuchar just to help somebody like you out. Because if I skip over them, that means you're going to make some money on them.
I'm a big Kuchar fan, and he falls into that category of guys that I feel very comfortable putting placement bets in, whether it's a top 40 or a top 20, because he feels like he always sneaks in there unless he has a bad Thursday. And
he's eighth in my model this week.
Yeah, he's 15th in mine, and it's powered by the good, ranking 4th in good drives gained, which I really like. And he's a great iron player. That's going to be the strong thing for me. He's not the best putter, and he's not the best wedge player, but he's very determined to come out here and still play. And he does a lot better on these courses that are under 7,200 yards. And I think that's a really important thing to look at for him, is that all these courses are under 7,100 yards.
Yeah.
And Pebble Beach is 6,800, Monterey is 69. Spyglass Hill is just over 7,000. So, I mean, it's important to note that, Kuchar is a guy that doesn't need to hit the ball far. He just needs to hit it close. And I really like how
165 on DraftKings for top 20.
Yep. And he ranks in the top 10 of players in this field in terms of total strokes gained at this tournament. So, I believe I believe he ranks 7th in that group. So, I mean, I'm confident in Kuchar. He's a guy that I can comfortably bet, not only as a placement, but as an outright, and say, this guy will have a chance to win. He can put himself into position to win because he puts together everything I want to see. But I am probably more comfortable betting him as a placement. He's plus 400 on Bet Rivers to place in the top 10, and plus 175 at Bet365 as a top 20. So I like either of those for him. I'm going to bet him outright. I took him at plus 4,000. It's a little bit of a smaller number, but I didn't really find a ton of people I wanted to bet outright this week. And that's probably because I haven't dug all the way in. I still will be digging in well into tonight.
That is the Dominican Republic hangover right there. I got
as
to name that. He was off my board. Hold on, where was he on my model here? Let me see. Let me go back down here to his price. Yeah, 31st in my model. Really good approach player, really good tee to green, really below average everywhere else. But he, in the last 5 years, he leads total strokes gained at this event, and that's
and
Kevin
this is
Streelman. Kevin
ooh.
Streelman. He's 7,100 on DraftKings. He has played recently wise. His recency form is terrible. But this guy has dominated this. He missed the cut last year at this event, but outside of that, he has dominated this course. Hold on, I'm going to bring up all his finishes at this event.
He's
He's got
125 to 1. That's a really
125.
good number. That's a
He's got
really good number.
a second, a seventh, a sixth, a 14th, a 17th, a miscut, a 40th, a ninth. He's never won this event, but he's got one, two. He's got like 5 top tens in the last.
I mean, if you want to swing, that's a place that I would swing on him. And he is, and I am still looking for it because I cannot find it for some odd reason. Plus 1,000 at Bet Rivers for a top 10, and all the other places have him at plus 850, including DraftKings for a top 10.
360 for top 20. I mean, a guy that's got that much success at one event, you got to at least think about it.
It feels like he is another guy that falls into that very safe placement kind of thing. I was on a Kevin Streelman kick a couple of years ago. I'm sufficiently off it after I watched him post horrible result after horrible result elsewhere. But he's a guy who can string together a few good days and one okay day to where he gets into that, top 20, top 30 range, and you're giving yourself a good amount of ROI by betting him in those spots at the same time, you can throw a few bucks on him, and if he does sun run, then you're getting paid.
Yeah, so absolutely. Real quick before I got one other question for the event, but before we get to that, any other names you got? I mean, there's a lot of names I like. So I've got a new strategy with DraftKings with my lineups that I started last week. It bombed last week, but the whole point of winning a GPP, everybody wants to win a GPP, but everyone conforms into the same strategies that the same people have been giving, week in and year out, and that's you keep your player pool tight, you do this, you do that, you pivot off of high-owned guys, and I've been talking about not pivoting off of guys you like for a long time. And last week I started a new strategy that I've been thinking about and trying to formulate where I don't keep a tight player pool. I find 3 or 4 people I like a lot, load up on those 3 or 4 guys, and then instead of having 19 or 20 names in a 20 lineups, going with 30 names or 32 names, but having 10 names that I click 1 or 2 times. And it didn't work last week because of one thing, and that was because my number one guy was Will Zalatoris. And obviously he bombed.
Me too.
You got 12 or 13 clicks on a guy in 20 lineups and he misses the cut, you're pretty much screwed. Is there a guy this week that you think everybody's high on, including yourself or I am, that could totally pull a Will Zalatoris and bomb? A guy at the top of the board, top 5 or 6 guys that we're all way too high on that could totally bomb?
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I think if anybody is, watches the show and gets to this point and hears me say that Victor Hovland is my bet of the top 10 guys to miss the cut, then yeah, I think they view it as kind of crazy. But this is, at a course where you're playing 2 days on a track where the greens are so small that you have to be an expert around the greens to get around them. And what do we know about Victor Hovland? His defining statistic so far on the tour. It's very sad that it is, but he is the almost self-proclaimed worst chipper on tour. And I'm not really sure if that's changed so far this year. I haven't really been keeping track of him too much, but it's not strong. He did not grade out very fairly in my model this week. In fact, he's 61st in my model, 106th around the green in those last 24 rounds, 98th from the 100 to the 125 proximity, 80th in greens and regulation gained, 44th in good drives gained, 65th in strokes gained approach. I mean, it's just he's not. And again, this is me weighing very heavily on the model, but just not good. Not good, man.
Well, see that kind of counters one of my theories. So my guy to answer that question is Tom Hoagie, because I think a lot of people are high. He's the second highest projected owned guy for fantasy.
See, I feel the same way about Hoagie. I wouldn't be shocked if he missed the cut either. It's just because he's prone to doing dumb things on the course that cost him strokes. And Hovland is the exact same way to me.
So Hoagie, I think, is part of that sticker shock group. Now, I won't go. I have him in 3 of my 20 lineups. So I've got a very small taste, because if he goes on and repeats or goes on and contends to repeat, I want some taste of him.
Right.
But Victor Hovland on the other side, I've had this theory, and it kind of has played out a little bit. I haven't really officially tracked it. But in these weak fields, someone like Victor Hovland, I mean, Victor Hovland is 1 spot ahead of Tom Hoagie on the DraftKings price board.
Right.
But the difference in talent between Victor Hovland and Tom Hoagie,
huge.
I think it's pretty. There's huge. And I used this with a couple people in weak fields in the last 6 months or so. When you're an elite player in a weak field, even if you play your B+ game, you should contend. And Victor Hovland, everything you say about Victor Hovland, I agree with 100%. He is nowhere on my card. But Victor Hovland, even if he plays a B+ game, does everything great, struggles around the green like he always does, isn't that good enough to beat a Tom Hoagie, to beat a Putnam who's 9,700, to beat a McCarthy at 9,200 or Power at 9,800? Isn't B+ Victor Hovland better than these other guys?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I think we said the same thing about Will Zalatoris last week when he had one solid day on Wednesday and then completely falls apart on Thursday and shoots, 5 over, 6 over, missed the cut by a stroke, had a chance on 18 to get back to even and make the cut and didn't. But, it's just these guys have one off day. They only have 2 days. So if they screw up one of their days, there's a decent chance they're just not going to make it, no matter how good they play on one of those days. One bad day can do it. And with Hovland, there's just way too much evidence of him stringing together a number of bad holes where he gets himself behind and then he's pressing, and then that's never good when you're pressing and trying to make the cut, especially as an elite player in a weak field like this. It'll just make you press even harder.
All right, so if you had to pick one golfer, you're going to put your whole thing, you're all in. I always say I have one all in play every week. This week I got a 1A and a 1B. But if you had to pick your all in play this week, that you're going to put all your eggs on him winning the tournament, most clicks, fantasy, everything, who is it this week?
If I have to put all of everything, it's probably going to be Alex Smalley. He's probably my favorite golfer that I've looked at this week. Him and Power are going to be up there for me. I'm gonna probably put at least I'm probably gonna put a full unit on each of them to win, and then we'll go probably with a half unit on Kuchar, and I'll have top 5, top 10, top 20 on each of them as well.
Okay. I actually have a unit and a half on Power to win outright. He is my all-in play for sure. I just have this sneaky feeling about Lanto Griffin. He's like my semi all-in play. He's got almost as many clicks in DraftKings lineups. I've got a single whole unit on Lanto because 90 to 1, I don't know. Normally when people get over 80 to 1, it's a half a unit or 3/4 of a unit. For something about Lanto this week, he's recovered from his injury. I don't know. I got something.
You've sold me. I'm gonna throw
especially at 90 to 1. How can you, plus 320 for top 20? I mean,
I'm gonna throw a piece on him at plus 750 for a top 10, and I think I'm gonna be very happy.
I think you sold me on Smalley in the betting aspect of things. I mean, he was already on my DraftKings lineup card for a few lineups, but might have sold me on a top 20 or top 10. Maybe an outright on him because I want to say I've actually hold on. Let me check my spreadsheet here because something I'm trying to do is spreadsheet all my bets in my lineup so I know what's working. That's why I knew to ask you about your philosophies on top 20 because I've lost like 90% of my money on top 20s. Mm-hmm. I still got about 3 units left to bet this week on outright. Mm-hmm. And
let me give you one. Let me give you one that you could take a little bit of a swing on. Okay. And I was extremely shocked that he showed up so high in my model because he's 125 to 1.
Okay.
And he ranked at number 1 in my model. That is Ben Taylor.
Ooh, he finishes 5th in my model, so we're pretty close on a guy like
He's top 10 in greens and regulation gained, strokes gained putting, good drives gained, top 15 strokes gained approach, top 50 in both proximity and around the green. I mean, I had to look up who Ben Taylor was. I didn't even know at first, but he's gonna be there. He's gonna be there, and he ranks out very highly for me. So I'm gonna be looking at him. I'm gonna toss a nickel or two on him to win, and hopefully he comes out very strong and he's sitting right there in the bottom of the 7K range on DraftKings as well at 7,200.
You know what breaks my heart? So the way I do my DraftKings lineup, I write down about 40, 45 names that I might play. And then I star the ones I want to focus in on. I circle the ones that are my elite top clicks. But then there's always 5 or 10 names that get eliminated at the end. Ben Taylor was one of my final cuts, which means if my track record is accurate, my final cuts normally finish in the top 5. So Ben Taylor is a slam dunk play because one of them recently, Christian Kirk, he finished top 5 recently. He was a final cut. All my final cuts always finish out really well. So that's good for you.
Yeah, him and Brendan Todd are 2 guys I'm going to sneak into the back end of my card.
Look at that. That's another guy that was a final cut for me right there.
him and Brendan Todd ranked out 1 and 2 in my model, and when I ran the numbers, and this is the consistency model. I think it's the consistency model. It is it is the consistency model. And when I ran this model, I was not expecting to see those 2 names come out at the top. And you got guys like Matthew Neesmith on there, Russell Knox, David Lipsky. I know you have an outright on Lipsky. I think a lot of people are high on Lipsky. I know John Hosborough.
Yeah, I won't lie. Like, the first thing I do every week in my preparation is I read the PGA Tout, article of the week that starts off every Sunday night with his course preview and betting.
Yeah, I love that on the lines. Yeah, it's one of my favorite articles to read.
The best at covering. He'll be on this show in a couple of weeks, actually.
Okay.
And whoever his spotlight article or spotlight in his article is a week, I bet it almost every single week. And Lipsky was his spotlight guy, and that's why he was literally my first bet I made outright, because literally I read his article and then I start doing my research. And his article at Lipsky, I'm like, it's 60-1 on one of his guys. I'm like, let's go. That beat that. I will say,
and he's also 3 for 3 on his last 3 Pebble Beach outrights.
Okay.
From the last 2 Pro-Ams and the U.S. Open. So
he's the Pebble Beach whisperer, where I'm the Farmers Insurance whisperer.
What a great duo you guys will be.
There's no top 40 number. His top 20 number is plus 700. DraftKings hasn't released their top 40s yet. A name that I love in weak fields, and this is just a joke, really. And Jason, my normal co-host, he understands there's a weird fascination between him and I, just because we played the same golf course a few times. He belonged in a golf course that I played at a few times, and that's my man Sean O'Hare. And he is an awful golfer, but he loves short courses and he loves weak fields, and he will make the cut this week. So if he makes the cut, it's a top 60 advance, because it's after a 3rd round cut. If you can find even a plus 500 or plus 450 on him, top 40, Sean O'Hare is the name to go.
Let's see. I mean,
he'd be at the bottom of the card no matter where.
Yeah, looking.
You're dropping a quarter of a unit on this.
He's plus 850 for a top 20 at Bet365.
Way better than DraftKings.
Yeah, DraftKings has O'Hare at 700. If we're looking down at that range, guys like Ted Potter who have won this thing before.
That's the crazy thing about this event. You got guys that are 9-1 that have won this event. Then you got Ted Potter at 500-1.
Ted Potter's plus 4,000 just to get top 20 at Bet Rivers. I mean, you can bet that, and you put $10 on that, you win in 400 if he just makes the cut and has a solid week. I mean, one of these guys is. I mean, DA points who won this event like 12 years ago, is 125 to 1 for a
He's a
top 20.
he's 100. Yeah, dude, come on now. You can't
I
beat
mean,
someone
you take crazy swings here and there. I mean, you can find whatever you want. The 8 points is 500 to 1 at DraftKings to win this event. I mean, can you imagine if he came back and Sun ran it one more time, 500 plus 500,000. I mean, that's 50,000 to 1, man.
All right. Well, Sam, we got Sam Wagman here at Swagman95. Before I let you shout out your places, because literally, if you go to your profile, you got like 900 companies that you work for right now. So I'll let you shout out all the important stuff. But real quick, before you leave, I gotta ask you: Eagles, Chiefs, where are your allegiance to for this Super Bowl? I know where they are, but where are your allegiance going right now?
My allegiance is always to those goddamn birds, man. Fly, Eagles, fly, and we're doing this one more
Do you like
time.
the Eagles to win this game?
I do. And they're not only the healthier team, they're the better roster. I mean, look, you shut down the best defense in the league in the San Francisco 49ers. And whether it was by a cavalcade of errors by them and the refs, I don't care, because if Brock Purdy was in that game, I don't think the score would have been that much different. It might have been 7 to 10 points, but the Eagles would have won by double digits in my estimation. Anyways, that was always my handicap going into that game, is that the Birds were going to take it home. And I look, it's the Andy Reid Bowl, it's the Jason Kelsey Bowl, it's the Joe Banner Bowl. However you look at it, it's going to be a great game between two storied franchisers. And look, Nick Sirianni, this is a revenge game for him too. Andy Reid kicked him off the Chiefs staff when he got hired in 2013. So there's a lot of angles to look at this from. Mahomes, I hope Mahomes gets healthy for this game, because the last thing we need is a full off season of people saying, "Oh man, you beat Mahomes. He was on one ankle. He couldn't do anything. You didn't deserve it." So,
as a bettor, do you fall in the same trap as I do and just blow your complete and total load on the Super Bowl, even though you know you shouldn't? I tend to go way overboard on the Super Bowl, even though I know I shouldn't.
No, we have and we'll be showing this over at Vegas Insider in the next week and a half. We will do both a regular prop show and a wacky prop show where we have national anthem and stuff from the halftime show and coin toss and stuff like that. There are a few props from that side I typically bet every year. I typically bet the national anthem. There have been quite a few years that I've hit it, including the very famous year where the guy stood outside Raymond James Stadium 3-4 years ago and recorded the practice because Raymond James is an open air stadium. He stood outside, held his phone up with the stopwatch so everyone could see, and press record, and that the sports books never quite adjusted in time. Everyone slammed that market. That guy was a hero, and he was right. It did go under, just like he recorded it doing. Coin toss, I will bet without fail every year, because I'm a degenerate who can't help myself.
That's the thing.
I've been along 4 years in a row.
It's a stupid bet, but yet I
4 years in a row. You can't help but do it because it's 50-50.
I normally bet just as a number ballpark, just to say I bet $100 on a game or a weekend in football. Say that $100 a weekend in football. On Super Bowl Sunday, I'm betting $250, and I feel like I'm stupid for doing that because there's so many stupid bets. But
I don't think that's a problem, and it's designed that way. It's designed that way. So the statistics are that the most casual bettors come out for the Super Bowl because it's not only a niche event for football fans, it's something that'll be on in nearly every household in America.
Agreed.
So everybody will want to bet it, but
all right. Well, why don't you do me a favor as we wrap this up? Obviously, you're with Vegas Insiders and everything else. Give a shout out to everywhere that you're working right now, all the sites that they can find your work, but obviously Vegas Insiders where you're doing most of your work right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wrapping up my football coverage for them. I'm still doing the golf betting preview every week. That'll come out either sometime tonight or tomorrow morning, depending on when I finish it. and how many last bets that I want to stick in that you've put in my head over the last hour.
I know. I got all these notes to re-go through now after you just put the same thing in my head.
But yeah, doing a lot of stuff over there for them. Content management, some front-facing things, but mostly stuff on the back end with their content management and content strategy. And then on the fantasy football and sports betting sides, I'm over at Football Guys and Fantasy Points. I do a variety of things at each. I do a healthy amount of sports betting content for Fantasy Points over there. And Football Guys, I am a staff writer for fantasy football, and I will be very active with them in the off season, putting out articles for them. And I'm really just excited to start breaking some stuff down for the NFL draft. My podcast, High Floor Football, with my buddy Jay Arsht, who is my Eagles fanatic co-host, will be back on the airwaves soon for that in the next few weeks. Looking to break some stuff down from the Senior Bowl that's going on right now. I got a lot of buddies down there, so I'm very excited to break into the off season. The off season is always fun. Right after the Super Bowl, you take your week or your 2 weeks off, and then you dive right into all the film and NFL draft prep, and then from there it is mock draft central as we look into dynasty as well. So I mean, I'm really excited for this time. The season's a grind. The NFL season is a grind. It's nice to have some golf to take our minds off of it from time to time. And then, once the Super Bowl wraps up, we're officially done with the 22-23 season, and we get ready for this off season. So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. All right. So again, everybody, you can find Sam Wagman. I always want to call you Swagman because it's Sam Wagman. It just rolls Swagman right off the thing. And I almost programmed the show to say Sam Wagman 85. Then I realized, no, you're not that old. 95. Make sure you follow him at Swagman95 on Twitter. My man, thank you very much for joining me today. We've tried to reschedule this like 3 weeks in a row between my schedule and your schedule. I'm glad I got you on tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Everybody have a great night. And again, like I said, this is Fairway to Heaven on DSM Media. Make sure you like, you subscribe, you follow on all platforms. Be back tomorrow morning. If you have the notifications on, you won't miss it. My morning show, Training the AM, I'll have Ed Kratz from Sports Illustrated on, talking Eagles, talking the Super Bowl. I'm kind of curious to ask him some questions about what it's like for a media member when your team makes the Super Bowl. So, we're going to get into all that with Ed Kratz tomorrow morning. Everybody have a great night. Let's make some more money. Let's keep hitting those outrights. Let's keep cashing those bets. Everybody have a great night, and let's go Birds. I don't care what the show is.
Go Birds.
Let's go Birds.
Let's go Birds.